KJA Global Channel, The Political System and Me. Series 3, Institutions, Power, Rights, and Accountability. Episode 22, My Transitional Justice, Repair, Accountability, and Non-Repetition. There are wounds that do not end when the violence ends. There are harms that do not disappear when a dictator falls. There are cries that do not quiet when the guns stop firing. Because what happens to a people is not only physical, it becomes psychological, it becomes social, it becomes institutional, it becomes generational, it becomes a shadow that follows the future. A nation in transition is not simply rebuilding roads, courts, and ministries. It is rebuilding moral reality. It must decide whether suffering will be acknowledged, victims restored to dignity, perpetrators made answerable, and abusive institutions truly changed. The name of that rebuilding is transitional justice. The phrase can sound technical, like something discussed in legal conferences. But the viewer encounters it first as a condition of life. A family still searching for someone who disappeared. A survivor living beside an unacknowledged place of abuse. A former official returning to authority without explanation. A community told to move on before anyone admits what happened. This is where our question begins. What do we do with what was done to us? How do we prevent the past from returning? Transitional justice is not an academic luxury. It is the difference between healing and relapse, between peace and a pause, between reconciliation and denial, between justice and revenge, between a future protected and a future haunted. The system reveal is truth, accountability, repair, and guarantees of non-repetition. Transitional justice rests on 3 pillars: repair, accountability, and non-repetition. In plain language, the hidden mechanism is truth, accountability, repair, and guarantees of non-repetition. Truth-seeking establishes what happened, who suffered, who acted, which institutions enabled the harm, which records exist, and which truths were buried. Truth may be pursued through courts, archives, investigations, truth commissions, forensic work, journalism, and community documentation. But truth-seeking must protect dignity, consent, evidence, and safety. A victim is not public property, and testimony must not become another extraction. Repair is the first pillar. Repair says, "You mattered." Repair begins with acknowledgement. It restores the victim's place in society. Abuse marks people as disposable or forgotten. Repair brings them home to public dignity. Repair is not only financial compensation. It may include restitution, rehabilitation, restored rights, public acknowledgement, memorialization, community support, and truthful official records. Accountability is the second pillar. Accountability says, wrong has consequences. Accountability is difficult because anger after suffering is natural. But justice cannot become partisan revenge. Revenge begins with a desired punishment and searches for justification. Justice begins with evidence, law, individual responsibility, due process, and a remedy proportionate to the wrong. Collective blame is not accountability. Punishing families or communities for individual conduct creates new injustice. Accountability must distinguish levels of responsibility and criminal conduct from lawful disagreement. But absence of accountability is not peace. If impunity survives, the old system remains alive inside the new system. Officials learn that power still protects abuse. Victims learn that law still excludes them. Society learns that violence remains profitable. Non-repetition is the third pillar. Non-repetition says, "We will not allow this again." Non-repetition requires more than promises. It requires reform of security institutions, courts, public service, education, media, archives, command structures, appointments, oversight, and complaint systems. Non-repetition is not simply preventing coups. It means preventing disappearance, torture, persecution, unlawful detention, political violence, and institutional obedience to a legal power. These pillars must work together. Repair without accountability becomes charity without justice. Accountability without repair becomes punishment without restored dignity. Non-repetition without both becomes hope without protection. Moving on without justice is not healing. It is an unaddressed wound waiting to reopen. Forgiveness is not denial. Accountability is not revenge. Reconciliation cannot be commanded by those who did not bear the harm. Instead of stopping at the visible outcome, map transitional justice through the rights chain. Right or legitimate interest. Law or constitutional rule. Responsible institution. Complaint or review. Hearing and evidence. Remedy. Enforcement. Right or legitimate interest asks, what claim is at stake? Truth? Recognition? Justice? Reparation? Return? Safety? Or protection against repetition? Law or constitutional rule asks, where is that claim recognized and are amnesties, immunities, limitation periods, or secrecy rules blocking justice? Responsible institution asks, who must act? A court, prosecutor, truth commission, reparations body, archive, missing person institution, ministry, local authority, or independent commission. Complaint or review asks, where can a victim, family, witness, or community safely bring a claim? Is the process affordable, accessible, confidential, and available in the person's language? Hearing and evidence asks, who listens, what evidence is accepted, whether witnesses are protected, reasons are given, and findings can be challenged? Remedy asks, what can repair the harm? Prosecution, compensation, rehabilitation, restored status or property, institutional reform, public acknowledgement, memorialization, or a corrected record. Enforcement asks, who makes the remedy real? Is there a budget, deadline, monitoring body, sanction, and authority capable of compelling compliance? A broken outcome may begin far upstream. The visible harm may be a missing person, an unpunished crime, an excluded victim, an unpaid reparation, or an abusive official returning to power. But the deeper failure may be an unjust law, destroyed records, an unfunded institution, political interference, unsafe testimony, a captured court, or a remedy that exists only on paper. The chain prevents us from reducing transitional justice to one leader or one trial. It identifies where recognition, law, capacity, evidence, review, remedy, or enforcement stopped working. When citizens and professionals locate that break, criticism becomes more accurate and reform becomes more practical. For this episode, the principal mechanism is truth, accountability, repair, and guarantees of non-repetition. The production graphic must make every link readable on a phone screen and must label country-specific or proposed arrangements honestly. Under dictatorship, transitional justice is blocked by concentrated command. Information is restricted. Institutions answer upward. Records may be hidden or destroyed. Perpetrators may control courts, police, archives, and public narratives. Challenge may carry personal risk. In a fragile democracy, formal mechanisms may exist while patronage, corruption, politicization, weak capacity, or insecurity makes protection inconsistent. Truth bodies may lack access to records. Trials may be selective. Reparations may be promised but unfunded. Reform may stop when political alliances change. In a functioning federal democracy, authority is constitutionally distributed, rights remain enforceable, and more than one institution can investigate or correct harmful power. National, regional, and local institutions may divide responsibility for trials, records, participation, reparations, memorialization, and reform. But no democratic design is self-executing. Institutions require capacity, integrity, funding, and participation. The viewer should compare who decides, how authority was obtained, whether records are public, whether victims participate, whether proceedings are fair, and whether guarantees of non-repetition exist in practice. Protection becomes durable only when transitional justice is converted into rules, responsibilities, records, and remedies. The minimum guardrails are: 1. Victim participation and protection. Victims must be able to shape priorities without being forced to testify, forgive, reconcile, or appear publicly. Protection must include witnesses, families, confidential records, and digital security. 2. Independent truth and investigative mechanisms. They need access to records, professional staff, transparent mandates, evidentiary standards, and protection from political control. 3. Fair criminal accountability with due process. Charges must be based on law and evidence. Defendants must receive a fair hearing. Victims must be treated with dignity. Political identity must not replace individual responsibility. 4. Reparations and institutional reform. Reparations must be accessible, funded, and connected to the actual harm suffered. Reform must address the institutions, command systems, incentives, and cultures that enabled abuse. 5. Guarantees of non-repetition. These include lawful security institutions, independent courts, civilian oversight, protected archives, free media, professional public service, and reliable complaint systems. These safeguards work as a system. A truth process without protection can expose victims. A trial without due process can become revenge. Reparations without acknowledgement can feel like payment for silence. Reform without records cannot identify what must change. And a remedy without enforcement does not repair the harm. Global relevance. The institutional test for transitional justice applies across political labels. Who decides? What limits power? What information is public? Who participates? Who is protected? And whether a real correction or remedy exists. Myanmar relevance. Apply the lesson without treating one organization, community, authority, or proposal as the whole country. Separate existing laws and institutions from interim mechanisms and aspirational designs. State clearly whether a mechanism operates now, only in some areas, or remains proposed. Here is the civic practice for this episode. See and ask. Ask what repair would actually look like beyond words. What was lost, what remains unsafe, and what dignity, service, record, right, or relationship should be restored. Verify. Examine authoritative standards on truth, accountability, reparations, institutional reform, and non-repetition. Identify the responsible institution, legal basis, evidence requirements, protection measures, remedy, and enforcement route. ACT. Build a 5-part justice matrix using a non-identifying illustrative case. Truth. Accountability. Repair. Reform. Non-repetition. For each part, name one institution, one record, one safeguard, and one possible remedy. Review. Record whether you can name the responsible institution, evidence, safeguard, or remedy, and one safe next step. Protect victims, witnesses, family members, confidential records, and digital security before taking any outward step. Use only lawful and proportionate actions. Do not turn an educational exercise into a public accusation. When citizens participate, transitional justice can become national healing. When they are excluded, it becomes elite politics. Transitional justice is not about living in the past. It is about preventing the past from living in the future. It is the bridge between trauma and stability, between suffering and dignity, between collapse and reconstruction. Repair says, you mattered. Accountability says, wrong has consequences. Non-repetition says, we will not allow this again. A society begins to trust again not because pain is forgotten, but because pain is honored and transformed into protection. The principle to carry forward is this. Transitional justice rests on 3 pillars: repair, accountability, and non-repetition. Ask yourself, what part of transitional justice should I now examine more truthfully, safely, and precisely? Never again, not in our name and not in our future. In the next episode, we continue with my security and police. Protection without fear. Continue the playlist, use the worksheet, and keep the practice safe, truthful, and disciplined. The system shapes our lives. Our participation shapes the system. Subscribe. Learn. Participate. Shape the future. KJA. Knowledge justifies authority.